Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. For a long time, we were looking forward to the eclipse that took place this year on April 8th. Probably ever since 2017, people started noticing that eclipse and this eclipse, and also the one in October of last year, seemed to go together, that they seem to be some kind of sign. You know, people have noted that when you take the paths of totality and the path of annularity of the 2023 eclipse, when you put all those together, it looks like the letter Aleph from Paleo Hebrew. We've also noted the cities that they go over. I'm not so interested in the Salems and the Ninevehs. That's something that other Christians are more interested in. But what I'm more interested in is the fact that they went over church sites. They went over the site of the New Jerusalem, of Adam-ondi-Ahman, far west. That was the 2017 eclipse. The October eclipse went through Utah, and it took the only path that it could to miss the maximum number of temples. The only operating temple that it went over was the Monticello, Utah temple. And then this eclipse this year, I got to experience that myself by going to Kirtland. Strangely, or maybe not so strangely, maybe it was meant to be, the church purchased the Kirtland temple the month before the eclipse, and the shadow of the moon went over the Kirtland temple. The path of totality also went over the Sacred Grove in Fayette, New York, where the church was established. So these were definitely signs. I don't know if I'm sure that they're pointing to something. I tend to think these days that, especially after this last general conference and Elder Stevenson's talk about bridges, that maybe these are kind of like bridges. He talked about the bookend towers of these suspension bridges, and I thought that was kind of odd. But I've been thinking about all these like bookend events, one of which is the eclipses that basically are toward the beginning of President Nelson's presidency, and here toward possibly the end. We don't know when he's going to pass away, but you know, the 2017 eclipse, that was just a few months before he became president of the church. And then we had this one. Is this kind of a bridge? I don't know. We've looked at April, or just kind of spring of this year, just in general, and how a lot of things have been coinciding and seem to be pointing to this time of year. And after reflecting on it, I think that it was possibly pointing to the purchase of the Kirtland Temple. And I think that that purchase is a lot more important than what we realize. I already did a video talking about how it fulfilled two prophecies. I'll put a link for that in the description box below. You know, there wasn't any like big announcement or anything like that at this general conference. I think that it all points to the Kirtland Temple, and maybe it's not going to be until we have 2020 hindsight that we realize just how important that was, that it came back into the church. It seemed like that this final eclipse of this like series of 3 eclipses, it seems like that eclipse itself highlighted the Kirtland Temple. It's like the Kirtland Temple is like the jewel of these 3 eclipses. That's kind of how I view it at this point. But whatever the case, here we are. The eclipse is come and gone. So what's the next thing? What are the next big events? What are the next signs that are going to take place? Can we know when the next big thing is going to be? Excuse me. Well, I think that we can have kind of like a ballpark idea. I want to talk about 7 things to potentially look for this year. Okay. As far as like them being signs or something that's going to really change things in a big way. So 7 things. So the first thing is that President Nelson is going to turn 100 years old in September, on September 9th. There's been a lot of attention about the fact of that he is as old as he is. Like when he, it was his 98th birthday when he became officially the oldest living prophet or apostle of this dispensation. So that was some kind of, you know, milestone or something. It got a lot of attention. And whenever something gets a lot of attention, I think the Lord uses that attention to communicate his will or communicate information to us. It's a sign. It's meant to like point our mind towards something, right? And so as we've thought about his age, he's been doing this thing where he keeps talking about the fact that even though he's 99 years old right now, he's in his 100th year of life, you know, going by the cardinal count of his age rather than going by the ordinal count of his age rather than the cardinal, meaning when you're a baby, that's your first year of life. When you turn 1 year old, you've completed a year and now you're starting into your second year of life. So President Nelson keeps pointing to the fact, or keeps pointing to his ordinal age. And I don't know why that is, but he's done it. There have been apostles that have done it. And we've talked about the significance of turning 100 years, at least in the millennium. In the millennium, either I don't know, either in your 100th year of life or once you've completed 100 years and you reach your 100th birthday at some point around that time, that's when you get changed from mortality in a quickened state to immortality in a resurrected state. And so the idea that I've had is, could President Nelson be the first one to go through this change? Kind of like a big, like, kind of example, not example, well, I guess, yeah, like an example for the rest of the church of, how things are going to go moving forward now that we're in the millennium, if that happens. So I don't know. He's going to turn 100 years old. Whether it's that or whether it's something else, I feel like that's significant. And when he does turn 100 years old, that is going to bring a lot of attention. So there's like these two times when he turned 98 and he became the longest living prophet or apostle of this dispensation. That's like the first big one. And then it's probably going to draw a lot of attention when he turns 100. There's probably going to be interesting things that are said, including by he himself. So we'll just have to see. So that's the first one. So that's like one thing to look forward to. We know that that's going to happen as long as he survives to his next birthday, which, we don't know. I feel like he is, though, personally. The second thing to look to this year, and I'm not saying look forward to, I'm just saying one big thing that could happen is you have President Nelson, President Holland, President Iring that are kind of like declining physically. In fact, this last general conference, President Holland started off conference and he talked about the fact that he had a near-death experience, that it seems like he would have died, but miraculously he was given more time, and maybe that was for that talk that he gave during general conference. But in the talk, he said that the Lord has graciously given him weeks, perhaps months left to live. So whether he makes it to the next general conference or not, I don't know, but I feel like there's a good chance this year that he may pass away. And when he does, at least for me, I know with a lot of you, that's going to be a huge change. He's been an apostle for so long, and in a lot of ways, he kind of stood out. One way that he stood out is his relationships with people in the Middle East and how he was instrumental in getting the BYU Jerusalem Center constructed. He's met with Benjamin Netanyahu, which is currently the prime minister of Israel, as this war is going on, which at this point, we don't know if this is the final war or not. It could be. So if he passes away, that's going to be very sad, of course, and then it's going to be interesting. And then we have President Iring and President Nelson. Imagine that both of them pass away this year. That means that the first presidency going forward is going to be completely different. You'd have President Oaks as president of the church, and then 2 new counselors. So that would be like a really big change to go through. Of course, President Oaks himself, or any of them, could pass away at any time. Anyone could die at any time. But if we're just looking at age, President Oaks, I think he's 90 years old right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, put it in the comments, but he is in his 90s. I know that for sure. So he's another one that just one day we could find out that he's passed away. I don't know. So we'll have to see how this year goes. All right. It feels like more than likely President Holland is probably going to go this year. The rest of them, it's hard to say. Okay, number 3. If President Nelson does pass away, and then President Oaks becomes president of the church. We've talked about this many times on the channel, that President Nelson is the heart surgeon, symbolically, metaphorically, spiritually. He's working on the heart of the church, trying to make us of one heart and one mind and pure of heart, becoming a Zion people, a people who are able, ready, and worthy to receive the Lord when he comes again. That's what he said in the October 2022 General Conference in Overcome the World and Find Rest. It feels like he's working on the heart of the church. So if he's the heart surgeon, and he became an apostle at the same time, where they were like called at the same time anyway, with President Oaks is the judge. he has a legal background. He was a judge. He was a Utah Supreme Court justice. He was a judge. So what does that say to you if we're looking at this symbolically? First you have this period of fixing hearts, purifying hearts, and then after that, judgment. So maybe it's fitting that President Oaks would be the president of the church at the time of the second coming. Don't know. But there's that to think about. And remember, I think there's certain people that struggle with this idea of like differences in presidencies or even down at the local level, like when you have one bishop and then you go to another bishop and there's like differences, and sometimes people complain, or they're like, well, why, the old bishop would have done this, and now this new bishop, he's not doing it like the same way. So, is he not following inspiration? No, that's not the case at all. You guys, individuals, we all have our individual talents and strengths and skills and backgrounds that we bring to the table. And the way that I see it is that the Lord already has everything planned out from the foundation of the world. He already knew who the 17th and 18th presidents of the church was going to be. He sent them to this life to a particular family under certain circumstances. They received the training that they did, that they received spiritually, academically, and the Lord prepared them for a certain use when they became president of the church, right? It's the way that I think about it is like programs, like for example, you have these Microsoft products. You have Microsoft Word, you have PowerPoint, you have Excel, which kind of like they come together in a bundle, or they can, and they're similar, but they have different functions. You have one that's for like writing a story with Microsoft Word. You write stories, you write articles, you write papers with Microsoft Word. You have PowerPoint that's for presentations. You don't use PowerPoint to write a book. I guess you can, but you don't typically do that. And then you have Excel for calculating things and organizing things in a certain way. And so I think it's just like different instruments, whether you think of it like that, or you think about it like a doctor. Doctors have different instruments for different situations, dentists, engineers, carpenters. You use different tools for different situations. So you shouldn't be concerned or think that something's wrong if the Lord has gone from a screwdriver to a hammer. You think that he's going to do everything with just a hammer or just a screwdriver? No. So that's why, and I feel like he like gives us this hint symbolically, like this is my prophet that I'm using to fix the heart of the church. But after that's done, it's time for judgment. I'm not saying that that's doctrine, you guys, but it's not too hard to see, is it? Okay, so that was number 3. Number 4, red heifers. I talked to Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz. A lot of you saw that interview. He talks to the people that are going to be doing the ceremony, the people at the Temple Institute. So just go back a couple weeks. I did an interview with him. You'll find it very easily. He said that it very well could happen this year, and it probably will happen this year. They did find the Cohen or the priest that could do it. I haven't heard any news on that, by the way, but I think that they're pretty close to doing it. So there's 2 ways to look at it. The one way is like, how is it going to affect the situation in Israel? How is it going to affect Judaism? Is there going to be like a spiritual revival when that happens? Yeah, that could be. It might be that some people will be turned on to that, and they'll get more interested in their own religion, Judaism. So there could be religious impacts from that within Judaism itself. But also it could affect the war. Hamas and Hezbollah, I've done videos about this before. I found the articles. Both of them have talked about one of the reasons why this war started was because of the red heifers, which I don't think it's like solely because of that. I tend to think that it was the straw that broke the camel's back when the red heifers were shipped from the United States to Israel. But how is that going to impact the war or other things? There might be people out there in the Arab world, the Palestinian world, that aren't too happy about that. How's it going to impact Israel and the war? And then, as far as like our church goes, again, this was a commandment during Old Testament times. to purify the people. It was meant to point forward to Christ. We've done a research into that, how essentially the red heifer represents Christ and everything that's associated with it. I've had this idea that, they've gone through this like really painstaking process to find a kosher red heifer. It's like really hard because all the hairs have to be red. You can't, I keep hearing different things, but I think the consensus is you can't have more than 2 non-red hairs. So it's really hard. And according to Maimonides, which was one of the Jewish sages, there's only been 9 red heifers in Jewish history. So a lot of Jews believe today that this would be the 10th. But is it something that we need for our church, and would it be done by Jews? No, I don't think so. Everything done right now is through the priesthood, and the Jews do not have the priesthood. Some of you are going to say, no, the Levites and the Kohanim, they have the priesthood. No, they don't have the priesthood. So they would have to become members of the church, and then there would have to be someone to say like, yes, we're going to do the red heifer sacrifice. So I don't think it has any application to us as members of the church, other than the effect that it's going to have on Israel, or if it is like a bridge toward building the third temple or something like that. I've played around with the idea that maybe what will happen is at the time that Christ comes to the Jews, like if it happens this year, he may come just as they're about to sacrifice the red heifer and stop them and say, no, I am the red heifer. It's me. And look, I told you back when I was alive, the only sign you were going to get is the sign of Jonah, which is the resurrected Christ. Jonah was a foreshadowing of Christ and his resurrection. And now here I am, a couple thousand years later, resurrected before you. It's time to put the Old Testament things away. This was an Old Testament thing. So I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But whenever it does happen, it's going to be big news. So that was number 4. Number 5, the war in Israel. Like no one knows how this is going to end. It may continue into next year, or it may not. It may lead to the final battle, well, it could lead to Armageddon and then the final siege on Jerusalem, which is like a separate event from Armageddon, it seems, based on our study. Those things could happen this year. And fine, if you want to go with like the numbers and you think that 3.5 years literally means 3.5 years, fine. I'm not so married to that idea, because the Institute Student Manual says that 3.5 is the symbolic number, and I'm going with that. But if it does happen to be 3.5 years, then probably not this year. But if those things do take place this year, that would be the conclusion of this war, because then the millennium starts. Christ comes, he saves the Jews, and then we launch into the millennium. So either the war could end this year, maybe this isn't it. Maybe it'll end. Maybe there will be some major escalation and it'll continue into the coming year or following years. Or this might be the final war and maybe it'll be stopped by Christ this year. I don't know. But we should keep our eyes on the war. The next major thing that I'm tracking is they're still talking about moving into Rafah, which is like the final like stronghold of Hamas. They have to like evacuate the civilians there. That I guess like most of the people that have evacuated the northern part of the Gaza Strip have gone to Rafah, so they have to get them out and then basically finish off this war. I haven't heard so much about escalation with Hezbollah. That would be a much bigger war. I just haven't heard too much about that recently, but that could always pop off. And then we've already had this first confrontation, like a direct military confrontation between Israel and Iran this year. And based on a video that I did, which was based on an article written by Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz, that attack from Iran, it was a miracle that 99.9% of all the drones and ballistic missiles and cruise missiles were intercepted. It seems like a miracle took place, and I believe that. So it may be that just now is not the time, but it could be later this year. Who knows? Okay, the 6th thing is the war in Ukraine. I felt from the very beginning of it that it was a very significant war. It's the largest land war in Europe since World War II. And there's all sorts of potential for escalation or for this becoming a world war, especially with what's going on in Israel and what's going on with China wanting to take Taiwan. And this axis kind of like forming. You have, Russia, um, the Palestinians, Iran, North Korea, China, that are kind of like one axis, and then they have their other friendly nations that are friendly to them, and then you have the West. And I've said before, I feel like this is kind of like a big world war that's kind of already going on between those that are globalists, the West, and those that are nationalists, the Russia and China, that want to like fight for like sovereignty. And it's like more complicated than that, but I feel like that's like one of the big sticking points is like, what should the world order be? Should we continue as sovereign nations, independent, strong, fighting for our own interests, or should we like kind of get rid of the idea of sovereignty and become this like big, just like Star Trek, the United Federation of Planets, where everything just kind of melds together? I feel like that's basically the big conflict and what this is really all about at its very core. But anyway, World War III, maybe it's already started and we don't know it, because historians will have to look back and say, oh, this was the date when it started, when Russia invaded Ukraine. There'd probably be like debates about when it started. So for all we know, maybe it already has started, but the point at which we would all officially say that we're in World War III, maybe that will come this year. Maybe there will be a big realization. Okay, this is it. It's World War III. And then the seventh thing is that for the United States, this is a presidential election year, and it's not just any, it's not just any year. Before Biden, we had President Trump, and everybody lost their minds because of that. And then we had the elections, and Biden became president of the. I was about to say president of the church because I say that so much. Thank goodness, no. He became president of the United States, and there's just been like, I don't know, there's like this big political thing going on. The country and probably the world has never been as divided as it is right now. And so as we get closer to November, things are probably just going to get crazier and crazier. And, based on however the elections go, we'll see what happens after that. But things could get really insane. You may have seen it or you may have not. I did a video where they're calling this year 2024 the biggest election year in world history, because it's not just the United States that's having national elections. I can't remember if they put like a number to the countries, but they took the entire world population, and 4 billion people this year live in a nation that's having some type of like national elections of some sort. So, there were a bunch of articles about that. So just politically speaking, this is a really crazy year. We see what's going on with these protests at these campuses, and I may make a separate video about that. I have some thoughts on it. Maybe that'll be the next video. I don't know. But, there's a lot of struggle and chaos and strife and war and division right now. And it's probably just going to get worse as we get closer to the presidential elections for the United States. I thought I had something else to say about that. Maybe not. One last thing. I guess this is like a bonus. So we've put together that list of longest living leaders or longest serving leaders of these different countries and churches and stuff like that. Like Mikhail Gorbachev, the longest living leader of the Soviet Union. We had Queen Elizabeth, the longest reigning monarch in British history. She passed away the day before President Nelson hit his 98th birthday, where he became the longest living prophet or apostle of this dispensation. As though to say that these worldly leaders, this whole like list, I have like a spreadsheet that has all of them, as though to say that, these eras are coming to an end. The world as we know it is coming to an end. This old world order, we're going into the new one, which is the millennium, where Christ will be king of the world. I feel like that's the overall message. And you've had all these countries represented: the United Kingdom, China, the Soviet Union, Greece, the Catholic Church, because they, within just a couple weeks of each other, the longest living pope and the longest living nun in church history passed away. So you have all these things, and the one that's missing from the list, as far as like, president, king, prime minister, like that level, the last one that we're kind of waiting for, or that I'm waiting for, is the longest living president of the United States to kind of like complete this series. I think that it is a thing. And he went into hospice care. It's Jimmy Carter. He's the longest living former U.S. president. He went into hospice care February of last year. And so literally any day he could pass away. And once he does, I think that that's going to mean something. We'll have to see how this whole like turning 100 years old comes into play, because he was born, I think it was a month after President Nelson. They're the same age. President Nelson's birthday is on September 9th, 1924. And then Jimmy Carter, I think, was like in October of 1924. So if both of them make it to 100, that's interesting. Or you could think of it like this. If Jimmy Carter passes away at 99 years old, he doesn't make it to his 100th birthday, but President Nelson does, then, think about that. But anyway, so those are the 7 things. President Nelson turning 100. The potential of President Nelson, Holland, Iring passing away this year. That's something that could happen. President Oaks becoming president of the church and him being the judge. Number 4, the red heifers. Number 5, the war in Israel, like what's going to happen to the war this year. Number 6, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and potentially World War III. And then number 7, this being an election year, like a pretty, I think, major election year. Okay, so that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.